What you're about to hear is part of the Podgods Network. If you have a problem with anything you hear, please write it in an email and go fuck yourself. Enjoy the show.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
Salty Language presents The Enthusiast.
Hey enthusiasts, what's happening? We're back with another episode, and joining... I'm Bryan. Joining me as always is Tony, I guess. I always bugger these, so whatever.
It's tradition,
yeah,
really.
It is. Joining me as always is Tony.
Hi.
And joining us through the magic of the inner tubes is Travis McIntire.
Hello. Who
you've maybe heard on some other podcast at some point. Was it Daft Pod, I think you were on one time? No, anyway. And Snake Oil Comics.
Snake Oil Comics a lot. I've been on old Daft Pod a few times. Hopefully you guys haven't actually listened to any of the times I was on Daft Pod.
Well, here's the thing. We're friends with Neil and Annalise, so...
This is bad news.
Yeah.
All right, cancel this interview's over. Man, yeah, so true stories. Those are all true stories. I have my wife will tell you that I have like one beer in, the first thing to go is my filter.
Ah, well, okay.
So,
all right.
Wow, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, that's pretty quick, though.
I didn't think so. And, she's yelled at me quite a few times about the last time I was on Daft Pod, and then I made her get on Daft Pod.
Which was gold. I don't understand why she'd be upset.
That's what I keep telling her. I'm like, you do not understand. It was really popular. People thought it was hilarious. It was great. And she is like, I don't understand what you don't understand about me not giving a shit about that at all.
Awesome.
Like, alrighty then.
Well, at least she's always going to keep you grounded. Like
Exactly.
Your head is never going to get too big with that kind of influence around you. So yeah, that's.
I'll say, she sounds like a hoot anyway. Listen to that episode.
Yeah.
I'd love to give a good plug, but I don't remember what episode that was on.
Yeah, I don't either.
For her show.
Yeah, I don't either, but it was a really funny episode. Even listening to myself, which is going to sound like the most arrogant thing of all time, but I laughed quite a few times listening to me.
Yeah,
which seems pathetic, but it was just funny.
No, I understand. I was the same way because when I saw the length of the episode, I'm always like, ooh, because the thing that was like 3 hours, and those are always a punch in the beans, but. Not that. I mean, we've done plenty of long episodes.
Yeah, that's kind of standard almost.
But yeah, it was. Oh, man, that was a great show. And then they were, when you were like, oh, hey, let me get my wife and.
Yeah, she did not know what she was getting into. She's like, "What do you mean, come down?" It's like anytime I'm like, "Come down to the basement with me," she's very suspicious. She's like, "What do you mean, come down to the basement?"
Okay. Are you wearing your Cosby sweater again?
Drink this and follow me.
Yeah. Oh. Like, why aren't you wearing pants? You're like, frizzle.
That's funny. I actually was not wearing pants.
Right. Yeah, I heard on that episode that's pretty normal for you when you podcast. So yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Only when we podcast from my home.
Oh, with others there, or just when you podcast from home?
Well, Devin is always there, but
and pantsless.
He doesn't really count. I don't mind if he sees me with no pants.
Well, obviously, I mean, we all do. That's, we've all seen his business card, and if you haven't, you should go check him out on Twitter.
That's true.
Actually, not just the business card, but after it, the Motor City Comic Con. And various sketches that he's had done. Oh, my gosh.
It's crazy, man. It is crazy. I don't know what it is about that guy, and it started off as like a funny joke thing with his business card, which I thought, like, this is marketing genius. People are going to, like, the right person. Like, if somebody is likely to come on our show and have a good time, they're the person who's going to laugh at that card.
Right.
So it's a perfect thing, because if they dig the card, then they'll have a good time on the show.
Definitely,
If they're like, oh, this card is awful, then chances are they wouldn't like the show. So it's a great thing. But somehow that turned into, and now it's like artists want to draw horrible things of him.
I was...
He's turned into like their French girl
Right, yeah. I think when we...
That's all I want to see now.
He's like a horrible muse.
Yeah.
The worst muse ever.
I must draw you.
It's like there's no hard angles. It's just
Right.
all...
Next thing you know, it's like he's disrobed and he's found a couch that wasn't there beforehand.
Oh, God.
He's just lounging. Like,
Yeah,
where'd you get the couch?
He's something else.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, you're part of the I know you're part of the Michigan Comic Collective, but
Yep.
what's your official title in that college?
Well, I guess my official titles on the Articles of Incorporation are that I'm the president. But
Nice.
generally, Steve and I just refer to ourselves as co-founders.
Oh, so no veto power for you?
No, not really. I suppose
President sounds way better.
it does sound better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess if you were to go all the way back to kind of the beginning of how it started, Steve and I were sort of the first two to start talking about this might be a cool thing. But honestly, at the time, we didn't think it was going to be anything like what it turned into. We thought it would be like, hey, let's get like 4 or 5 of the other guys we know who are kind of self-publishing comics, and let's make one little book, and then we'll sell it out of the store here.
Sure.
That'll be fun, right? And cheap, and then it kind of ballooned into this much larger thing.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Like when Dev first was telling me about it, I was like, that's so awesome, because there's a lot of artists and writers in various areas that are within minutes of each other, and and much like there's podcasts, there's to all these podcasts, and it's like we live within an hour or 2 hours of each other, kind of a thing. And it's like there's no reason not to cross over and help each other out, and
Right.
kind of
Exactly.
circle up, if you will.
Absolutely, and it kind of is. It kind of is all about that, and also sort of a realization that the business, even though it is a very friendly business and it's a very open arms kind of business,
Mm-hmm.
it's a hard business.
Yeah.
It's a tough business. It will chew you up fast, and it requires. It's so much more expensive than people think it's going to be.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That it's just a little bit easier if you kind of have a little bit of an army with you.
Yeah. Well, definitely, because it benefits everybody when you get something like you were talking about, that the book of where you're all in it, because everybody gets a little publicity out of that, and you can everyone can. I don't know, I don't know the financials on that kind of thing, publishing and all that. I know, as you said, that it's not cheap, because we've known a few people who've self-published now, so, and various like Kickstarters not working and stuff, and I don't know, it's just a really cool concept to help, like we had Greg Wright on, the one time talking about his book, with multiple artists and stuff, and I was like, that's so cool, because everybody gets a little, you can get a little sample of different artists, and you know.
That book, strangely enough, I actually have one of them right in front of me right now, because I'm getting ready to mail one out to somebody who just bought one.
Nice.
But yeah, Wild Bullets has been a huge success for us.
Right, which is cool. That's like I said, I'm such a fan of this, because I've seen so many artists and writers and different stuff, like on DeviantArt or different other websites, and they're like, hey, I'm looking for somebody, but cost is a problem, or this is a problem, and it's like, yeah, you're gonna be kind of stuck for a while, because you can't expect somebody to do the work for nothing,
Yep.
Right.
And also, there's so many aspects to the whole thing, and I'm certainly not any kind of expert, but I've learned a lot in the last 3 years.
Well, let me tell you this. Our theory is, when you put a microphone in front of a person and you're on the internet, instant expert status. So, sir, you are now officially an expert.
Sure sounds like I'm talking to an expert.
Well, I got to get Laura back in here, then. She needs to know about this.
Yeah, that rule may not be applicable to wives. So, sorry.
But yeah, another kind of big aspect of the MCC, and what we try to what we try to push, what we try to help people with, and what we try to educate people with, like when I do a lot of panels at conventions and whatnot, is about the business or the economics of comics and kind of about the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of publishing.
Yeah.
Because there's so much more to it than, hey, I've got a script and somebody else is, starts drawing panels. There's just so much more to it that you just don't know, as when you're starting out. And we try to make it easy, and we try to be like, you know what, we've got people who are also new and starting out and doing taking their first couple steps, and we've got people who have worked for Marvel and DC, and we've got people who publish their own stuff, and people who've worked with small press for 20 years, and we try to make people available to ask questions, and how do you do this, and what does this mean, and can you give me a list of some good printers to check out, to check prices? I mean, we try to do everything, all the way from like, hey, I've got a script, will you look at it, to, hey, what's a good way to approach stores? Because we include, I think right now, almost 20 comic retailers in the state of Michigan,
right,
in our group.
And that's a tough sell, because when Tony and I had a comic store, once in a while, some guys from Toledo would come in and be like, hey, we've got a self-published book, can you sell it on, and stuff, and it's like, I can, but you've got to make the financials work for me too, and sometimes that's not the easiest thing. I remember a couple of guys came in the one time, and they were like, they basically wanted us to pay like $250 a book or something, and I'm like, it's too much, man. I can't, like. Yeah,
I mean, the problem with that is that they probably printed like 200 of them, which means they probably paid like $235 a piece,
right?
To have made,
because
and then that's just the reality of the economics of when you're making them. It's a hard thing to get over. What we try to do with the MCC. And what we do is Source Point Press, which is like the kind of a for-profit publisher that I'm also involved with, is depending on what it is. The sad reality is that if you're going to get serious about it, then you're printing overseas.
Yeah.
Otherwise you really can't make the economics work.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of writers and stuff posting on stuff, or not writers, but like teams where they've that's the holdup, is they're like, yeah, we can't find, for the budget we have, like they undershoot on their Kickstarter or whatever, and they're okay, we've got everybody paid, but we don't have enough to actually publish enough books. We're gonna take a bath doing it.
Yep. And a big part of it is that sometimes you have to suck it up and take a bath.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I think that if you took my lifetime, I'm deep in.
I'm sure. Yeah. Well, I always
dude.
I always kind of put it in the same thing as like somebody trying to become a pro wrestler or a comedian or struggling musicians. It's like you're gonna tour or you're gonna go from place to place and make you're gonna get paid in sandwiches.
Doing it pretty hard.
I'll take sandwiches.
All right, Travis McIntire not working for sandwiches.
Yeah, I should actually make that a reward tier on this Kickstarter I've got going.
Sandwiches.
It's a tough. It is a tough business. But so for Source Point, if we have something that we're getting serious about and we think that we have a good chance of getting it solicited in previews. And if we can get the print run around 3,000, and we think that that's reasonable, then unfortunately right now the only really reasonable thing to do is for economically is to print overseas.
Yeah.
Anything less than that, we have some really good relationships, and it all comes down to being offset versus digital printing. Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, offset printing, it has a huge upfront cost for the printer to set up, right? It's super expensive equipment, and you got to have trained workers and all this stuff.
I actually kind of did some of that for a little while.
Cheaper.
Yeah. Yep.
But we have a good relationship with some printers here, and they kind of know what we're trying to do, and I feel like they give us really, really good deals. However, I always look at if I'm going to walk into a shop, because we try to stay away from selling on consignment.
Yeah.
Right.
That was kind of the other approach that I got, and I was like, I was like, I just don't feel like that's fair to you. You know.
Well, it isn't, because the fact of the matter is that ultimately I'm going to end up giving you the stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're both going to forget.
Yep.
And it's going to be 6 months from now when they finally sell. But it's a really interesting thing, and you also you're. So I actually do a panel about this on approaching retailers, and so we talk about like what you're really asking them for, right? Because owning a comic book shop is you're not printing money, right?
No, yeah.
You know, it's a tough business.
If so, we probably wouldn't be.
Margins are small.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Can we contact your overseas printers about printing money?
That's so cheap.
Wait, and sandwiches. And sandwiches.
But it's really like when you're an indie or a small press or some weird thing, you're not just asking for their $2 on a $4 book.
Yeah.
You know, you're asking for 8 inches of shelf space, and that's 8 inches that could go to something that is guaranteed to sell, like whatever the new X whatever is.
Yeah.
And you're asking not only that, but now they have to read it, because it needs to be suggestively sold.
Yep.
You know, for it to move. So you got to try to approach them that way. Like, listen, I can do this. I can sell it to you for 50% a cover. You'll make this much. And I try to go in with a plan. These are the types of people that will buy it. This is what it's all about. This is how it's going to, this is how you can make money. You have to make it attractive, because in my experience, the comic store owner they are concerned to a certain extent about the end number of dollar bills that they're going to make, but what they really want to know is, how can I turn these over?
Yeah.
Can I make it happen?
Right. Yeah, because with me, I was all for it, because I've knowing people forever, because of going through art classes and stuff. I've known plenty of people who wanted to do to work in comics. I've known guys who, like our pal Eric Palicki, which he writes books. And stuff. So we've known people for years, and it's like, I want to help people out because, as a comic shop, you're kind of an indie thing on your own. You're not part of a chain, and you're not, but you're right. It's like, at the same time, it's like, I got to look at this, like, how can I sell this? Because if I can't sell it, why am I taking it on?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, another thing that I feel like people don't. One thing that really surprised me when we got the MCC up and running and it started to get more and more popular and I was getting contacted by more and more people is how many people were like, I want to make comics, or I've been working on this, or I've been working on that, but they've never made any effort to get into their local stores and get to know those people, because those people are like, those are the people that you want to know first. Right?
Yeah, true.
Those are the people that when you finally do get something out, you need to be able to call them and be like, hey, can I come into your store and do a signing? Can I do this stuff? Will you help me? Can push these sorts of things? And most of the time, your retailers are usually they're all for trying to help you out, so long as you're putting it in a way that is attractive to them as businessmen.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Right.
Makes sense. Yeah. All right. So all right, so the other reason we brought you on here, because I always love talking like this kind of stuff, because I don't know, I'm a process guy. Like, I love all the stuff that goes into making comics, even the stuff that seems the nerdy end of it.
Yeah, I'm that way too. I'm my as a day job, I'm a chemical thermal technologist, so I analyze giant data sets and do that kind of thing. So I'm very analytical and very process oriented.
Yeah, it's like when I was going to school for graphic design and different stuff. It's like I'm more interested in the process than I am anything else. But it's so all that aside, we also brought you on because you've currently got a Kickstarter going.
Indeed.
I do
for the book you're writing. I want to make sure this is said right, so I'm going to let you introduce the book. So,
the book is called Bayani and the 9 Daughters of the Moon.
Okay.
Yeah, Bayani is and now I'm going to say a word wrong.
Nice.
I believe it's pronounced Tuglug. which is the Aboriginal language of the Philippines. And that word, I guess its most basic translation means hero. But if you kind of dig a little bit deeper, it's a certain kind of hero. It's a hero that comes from nothing.
Okay.
Right.
So I read the book yesterday, day before, something like that.
Yeah,
right.
I read it yesterday.
So here's a question for you. I mean, obviously, because I'm posing it. What got you? Because it's an all ages book.
Yep.
Which I love. Because
Right.
you don't see a lot of that. That's definitely kind of gone by the wayside as the years have gone on. And which is cool. So that should help. Hopefully that helps you with the Kickstarter and such.
Yeah, I hope so.
But what made you do it as an all ages book? Not that it needs to be like some adult book or something, but
I think that the biggest thing was that so it didn't really start out that way. It started out because a lot of this stuff that I've written and done okay with so far has been more like horror oriented.
right.
And it started off with I was doing some internet digging, trying to find some visual aids that I could include in a script for some scary monsters, and so I ended up kind of stumbling across this list of mythological creatures, and it's all like hyperlinks, and I'm clicking on them and looking at pictures and start reading, and I end up kind of like falling into this internet wormhole of Filipino folklore and mythology.
Okay, that was going to be my follow-up, is
Yeah,
how
I
you
was
ended up in
wondering how
this
you got to
area.
the Filipino stuff.
Right,
All
right.
right.
Yeah, this is a couple years ago, and I'm reading about this stuff, and I've always been really into fairy tales and folklore and mythology. I mean, just about everybody is,
Yeah.
But most of us we're pretty familiar with the Norse stuff. We're pretty familiar with the European style of stuff. We're pretty familiar with the Greek and Roman stuff. Mm-hmm. And most of our art and most of our storytelling traditions kind of come from that stuff, and we're used to it, and we're used to that kind of. That's how we learn our lessons. That's how we expect our heroes to be. It's all kind of repeated over and over and over again in the storytelling traditions of our culture. And so I start reading through, Filipino creation myths and all the different gods and all the different demons and all the scary stuff. And some of the stuff is really scary stuff. And I was like, this is really, really great. And then I kind of put it away for a little bit. And then I was working on another project, actually, with Grant Perkins, the guy who did the art. That project, I believe, is being published in the UK the first quarter of next year. So strangely, this one kind of ended up passing it, just through the magic of scheduling.
Right.
And he had done a little 3-page short story that never got finished. It was written by Andy Lanning, who has written a ton of awesome stuff, but probably most well known for Guardians of the Galaxy. He wrote the series of the Guardians that the movie was based on, basically.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So, and it was this little 3-page thing that was kind of, and it was based a little bit on the Filipino, the folklore, mythological sun and moon, and kind of a little bit of that creation myth. And it was this little 3-page thing, and the character designs were really cute. But it had never been finished. It was sort of, just sort of sketched out, and whatever they had been doing had fallen through. And Grant was like, I love doing this. I love designing these kind of characters. And I was like, I actually love this stuff. What do you think about us doing something along these lines? And he was 100% for it. So we got a hold of, I wrote, kind of a normal pitch, right? That was kind of like, here's the full plot synopsis, here's the issue breakdown, all the normal things you would do. And I wrote the first issue, and I sent it to Grant, and we kind of like dinked around with it a little bit, and then we sent the package to Andy Lanning to be like, hey man, this kind of like started, this was sort of germed by your thing, is this all cool for us to do? And he was super positive about it. He's actually writing the foreword for the collected edition.
Oh, awesome.
And was like, yeah, go for it. And so that's kind of how the ball got rolling with that. And then for it to be all ages, which I've taken a really long walk to answer this question. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's totally fine. Yeah.
For the way that it kind of ended up being all ages was because I don't think the very first draft of the script was. But I think it kind of turned into an all ages book when I sort of realized that it could be.
Yeah, I was actually, as I was reading it, I was kind of like, because I know you've, it's been pushed as all ages because, again, that's a drawing point. Because there's a lot of comics aren't, and a lot of people are looking for stuff that aren't or is all ages. So I was like, oh, that's interesting, and I was reading it, and I was kind of thinking like, boy, this could be darker. This could go a different way. I don't want to sound like I'm criticizing. I just, just like this could easily be like a horror story. So I was wondering if that's where you started with it.
It kind of is still a horror story.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But what I as I was started to work on it, and the original like big story arc and the original first draft of the script, it kind of went through a lot of changes. But early on, I sort of realized this could be all ages. And, and you look back at the European tradition, and most of the kids' literature and the fairy tales and all this are very dark.
Yeah,
and
true.
Oh, yeah.
Very scary. And you see it come out now because we have a ton of popular shows like Grimm and Once Upon a Time and all this stuff. The fairy tales for adults are very popular right now.
Yeah, true. Yep.
And Disney, even though they do a lot of awesome stuff, are pretty much sort of like whitewashed fairy tales.
Yeah.
As kids literature, and that's fine. I'm not trying to like bash on them or anything because I enjoy a lot of the stuff they do, but it is a little bit different. What they're trying to do. Everything is pretty safe, and I kind of realized that this story could be a kid's story because of the all the little Easter eggs that I'm trying to pull out of this other culture and their stories and putting it in here. And it can still be scary because, I have a 3-year-old now. And so I'm starting to experience the world through a 3-year-old's eyes.
Oh, right.
Which is a really interesting thing to kind of see the world. And it's both like beautiful and terrible. Right.
Yeah.
But you kind of start realizing, like, oh man, the world is kind of scary, right? There's scary things out there, and things that seem innocuous are scary when you're little. But they have coping mechanisms that they can use, and it's through like learning about something and using their wit and their wile, even as little kids, to kind of do this. And so I just tried to focus on that kind of thing, like keep it scary, and also Grant's art makes it easy, right, to keep it kid-friendly because there's a cuteness to it and there's a funness to it. But if you look closely at it, there's also kind of a weirdness to it and like a little bit of terrifyingness to it. Like if you like the 3 ghosts, right?
Yeah,
for
they're
sure.
funny,
yep.
But you kind of like look at them for too long, you're like, man, they're a little messed up too.
Yeah, I actually thought that because like when the ghost first shows up, I was like, oh, it's a cute ghost, and it's like, and then the second time I was, because I flipped back because I was like, I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss something because it was drawn just a little. It felt a little, I don't want to say darker, but you know what I mean. It felt a little more or I got a little more like sinister vibe from it, and I was like, no, I think that's just me. Like, I think I'm just trying to make this into, like I'm just trying to make this into some horrible story that it isn't. So, but I really, you're right. His style really lends to kind of like towing that line really well.
Yeah, when I read it, first thing I thought was my daughter because she loves reading comics, and trying to find her kid-friendly books is not easy sometimes. It's not Adventure Time which is fine.
Yeah, Adventure Time. Yeah. Adventure Time is fine. This is, I hope, a little bit deeper than that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, I wanted to do something that had a sense of consequence. I wanted it to be a book that there was a little bit like kids could read it and it was funny and they liked it, but it was also scary and bad things could happen. And these kids keep working through it, and there's weird, scary monsters that they hadn't heard of before. You know, and there'd be kind of lessons to learn, just like because all those stories are sort of meant to teach lessons at one point or another. So anyway, that I guess a very long-winded way of saying that it turned into an all-ages book when, after kind of working on drafts of it, I realized this can be an all-ages book, and maybe it should be an all-ages book.
Right.
Because I could have an opportunity here to do something. I didn't set out to do it that way, but I have an opportunity to do something that, like, could be one of those magical things that are both kids and adults like, without being insulting to either one of them.
Right.
Right.
You know,
like that's like the golden goose. And I don't know if I'm going to make it there or whatever, but you know, after finishing it and then Grant finished the first issue, I felt really good about it. Like, man, like this really worked out nicely for me.
Yeah, it did. It's got to be an interesting challenge too, a little bit. That it kind of puts you in a different box than, you know, writing just horror kind of a thing, because you have to be mindful of, you know, kind of what's of balance, so that you don't get too far one way or whatever, you know.
Yep, and there's there are certain things when you're doing a horror book. There are certain things that you can totally get away with that you absolutely cannot do. So you have to find different ways to build tension and different ways to do the page-turning reveal that is a little bit scary and things like that. And you know, in an adult horror book, a lot of things will be based on being alone. You know, that's a good way to raise tension, is your main character is often alone and things like that. And it's dark, and panels will feel claustrophobic, like small panels as you get closer to a big reveal and things like that. And that's getting pretty technical with how you're planning out your book. But with a book like Bayani, you know, you're mostly using bright colors and you're mostly keeping things kind of open and airy. And you always have the kids are talking to each other because there's, you know, two of them.
Right.
Right.
So you're limited. Well, you're not really limited. You just have to think of different ways than kind of the tried and true horror tropes.
Yeah, and, you know, it's kind of cool to, or it's got to be kind of cool to, you know, flex that muscle a little bit, you know.
Honestly, one of the coolest things that's happened to me since I put out the first issue is that a guy sent me a message on Facebook, and it said, "Hey, I just downloaded this free book from Caliber's website, and I really liked it." And then he was like, "Are you the same Travis who wrote Up the River with Source Point Press?" Nice. And I was like, "Yeah, I am." And he's like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, really. I mean, most of my stuff is kind of horror." And I felt really cool because the dude was like, it doesn't even seem like it's the same person at all. Right. So I actually felt really good about that. I was like, man, that's kind of awesome. That
all right, flexibility.
Right.
Right. Exactly. Man, that's cool.
Well, that's a huge compliment as a writer, I'm sure, because otherwise, you don't want to feel pigeonholed. You know, like, oh, you can only do. I mean, not that that's always a bad thing, but it's, you know.
Like, no, I think for tons and tons of guys. I mean, my favorite writer, novelist, really. My favorite novelist is probably Neil Gaiman.
Okay.
And I think that you could like read one of his paragraphs, and people who are fans of his would pick it out.
Yeah, you're probably right.
He has a cadence and a style that is very recognizable.
Yep. But that's not a bad thing, you know.
No, in his case, it is totally not a bad thing.
Right.
And if I were him, I would never change.
Right.
But for me, I was really happy that somebody was like, I enjoyed both of these things, and they're completely different, and I don't even believe that you're the guy who wrote them.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about how many times, whether it's a movie maker or an actor or whatever, you know, and they step out of their, you know, a comedian or a comedic actor does a serious role, and everyone's like, boo, you know, go back to funny making.
Cable Guy's too dark.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, or, you know, Man in the Moon was, you know, or something, you know, or whatever. So, yeah, you know, like I said, you know, being pigeonholed is, you know, not always a bad thing, but it definitely can be, you know. So that's awesome.
It is.
Yeah.
What got you into writing comics anyway? Were you writing before just as a hobby? Or?
Tony, we've already settled this. Sandwiches.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
Need for sandwiches.
Right. Not a want, a need, because that's an adult thing.
So hungry. No, I went to school for creative writing and physics, actually.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Those two things go together.
Well, I think I wanted to be like Isaac Asimov when I was a kid.
Right.
So, I get out of school and I'm like 21, and I didn't want to go into graduate school because I just didn't feel like that was for me. And so I kind of tried to be a writer and do the whole thing. And I had a few little things here and there that came out and did this, and I get a short story accepted here, but there's no money in it whatsoever.
Yeah.
So at some point you were like, well, I really should think about getting some kind of job.
Yeah.
And also it sort of occurred to me that I'm 21 and perhaps I just don't have anything very interesting to say. Which now that I'm 36, I realize that was absolutely true. Not that I might have anything interesting to say, but that when people are 21, they often don't have anything to say.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, you haven't really,
true.
you haven't really lived a whole lot at that point. So yeah. Well,
right. So
on average, you haven't. There's some
exactly, and there are some writers who are 21 and they're great, and they just have like a natural gift to do that.
We call them jerks. Anyway, no.
Jerks. But for me, it was like, maybe you're just really not that good, and you need to live a little bit. So I ended up getting a job, more on the science technical side of things. And then several years went sort of just like zipped past, and next thing you know, I've got a career and a wife and children coming, and it's not like I had a midlife crisis because I wasn't nearly old enough, but it was sort of like
depends on your lifestyle. Yeah,
it was sort of like, man, I'm so comfortable in so many ways, but I never really got to make a comic. I never really got to do some of the things that I always sort of thought that I would eventually get around to doing. And then it sort of dawned on me that, well, you're only in your early 30s. You could just do it now.
Yeah,
plenty of time.
Yeah,
it's not that big a deal. So I started kind of, but I didn't really, I didn't know a lot about the business at that point. So I just started doing it and wrote some things, and then I started asking people questions and. In my naivety, I at the time, like Guy Davis is a guy from Michigan. He's worked on like Hellboy, and he did the art for BPRD for a long time. Mm-hmm. He's a concept artist, works for Guillermo del Toro. I didn't realize at the time that maybe you shouldn't just email guys like that out of the blue. But I did. I totally was like, hey, man, I'm a big admirer of your work, and I'd like to break into this business someday. Do you have any? And I don't know if he just had a good day that day or what was going on, but he responded to me and was like, well, there's this and this, and this, and good luck. And I was like, wow, what a nice guy. So I kind of took the advice he gave me and moved on to the next step. And then, one thing led to another, and then you kind of get a lucky break, and somebody publishes your stuff, and then you meet a bunch of other people, and you start a nonprofit publisher, and then, one of those books kind of takes off, and then it's kind of like, it's not this sort of thing that was like, I wrote the book, and then I sent it off to Caliber, and they contacted me and said, you're accepted. It's just
right.
We love this. Yeah. You're in.
It's just not really how it works. It's more of like this long, slow, like, you're just this guy that's hanging around all the time, and then next thing you know, like, you've got enough small things out that someone asks you, like, hey, what do you have? And because you're a complete dork, you're like, ooh, I've got this book right here on my phone. You should look at it. And it just works out that finally.
Well, it's like, I've never really been any sort of a writer, but I read, I know Brian Michael Bendis wrote a book about, kind of his how he rose as a writer, and I was like, there's way more to this than I ever thought there was.
Yeah, Bendis, he's a guy. I mean, he really, like, what I'm describing is like a tiny version of what Bendis did, because he basically was one of the first guys who kind of did it on his own, like just kept building his own thing, like cranking it, and like building suddenly he's a guy who's running a giant website.
Yeah,
from his stuff that other creators are coming to.
Yeah.
And like before too long, it was like the big companies were like, well, we have to hire this guy.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, he's like the biggest name in comics.
Yeah, because he went from writing just like his stuff, and then all of a sudden it was like Marvel's like, here, write whatever you want.
Yeah, Bendis is a guy who basically like rolled up to the impenetrable fortress of the big two and was just like, well, I'm just going to build my own fucking siege engine, I guess, and do that. I mean, I haven't liked every single thing that he's ever done, but I have a lot of respect for him as a writer and a businessman.
Yeah, if nothing else, I mean, you got to respect that he put his nose to the grindstone and just did the work. He's not a guy who sat back and so and so lucky they get this. I mean, maybe he did, but he still put the work in.
Well, there is definitely. You put in a ton of work, man. Even guys who are not doing well and are failing horribly are putting in a ton of work.
Exactly.
It is. It just is that way. But
yeah, it's a grind for sure.
Then there is an element of luck to it, certainly. But it's both like more and less than people think. I think anybody who's gotten to the point where they actually have, even one of the smaller, bigger indies, to look at their stuff will tell you that, like, I kind of got lucky, but they do a lot to manufacture their own luck.
Exactly.
To be in the right place at the right time and have stuff ready and have pitches ready to go and not just one thing and not just this one story that they've been working on since they were 5. Like I've got 10 ideas and I don't care if you don't like 9 of them because I only need you to like 1.
Yeah, it'd be like rolling up to a portfolio review and you just have splash pages, and expect to get a job off of that.
Might work out.
Yeah, I mean, something I hear a lot when I do conventions and I sit in with SourcePoint, something that we do at SourcePoint is we take open submissions at conventions, which has proven to be relatively popular.
Yeah.
Because we just a lot of places don't necessarily take open submissions, and you certainly don't often get a chance to have like the managing editor sit there with you and look at your stuff.
Yeah, I always kind of wondered about that because you go to a lot of the bigger Comic Cons and there's a lot of portfolio review stuff like for artists, but I never really saw anything for writers. I always kind of wondered how that worked. Like, how do you get peer review essentially? It's
very, very tough.
Yeah, I imagine.
It's very, very tough. So every time that we do it, we usually will get, 8 or 9 or 10 scripts in the course of a weekend, right? Which doesn't really sound like that much, but that's kind of a lot of people who are like packing up a script and bringing it in to be like, oh, I saw that this small press was going to look at stuff. And a few things that I notice that I hear a lot from people on the times that I've done it are things like, I've had this story in my head since I was in 5th grade or 6th grade or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm always like, never say that. Like, even if it's true, don't tell people that. Because nobody wants to read something a 6th grader wrote.
Except
essentially what this is.
Except for X-Cop, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. And that's like one thing. That's
yeah, exactly.
Everybody always wants to throw out like the one thing.
Like, I know.
Like, I've got this thing and it's 12 volumes long and each volume is 10 issues. And I'm like, that's 120 issues, man.
Like,
that's
nobody
10
gets that run.
years of monthly issues.
Nobody gets that run.
Nobody gets that run. And then everyone's like, well, Walking Dead. And I'm like, fucking, that's the exception that proves the rule.
Yeah.
That's that.
Kirkman is God right now.
Right.
No, but your name could be Warren Ellis, and you could walk into Image and tell them I've got 120 issues, and they would say no.
Yeah.
That's crazy talk.
Yeah. Like, fine, 118. Yeah.
Get you and your pointy beard out of my office.
Right. He's like, I'll work for sandwiches.
Come back with a 12-issue series.
Yeah,
something
exactly.
we can make money on.
Right, because if a 12-issue does well, you can, turn that into, more.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's, I try to be... and I've seen some really great stuff too. Don't get me wrong, but for some reason, like the people that you have to steer end up being more entertaining than the people who are like, here's a pretty good script.
Yeah.
When you're like, I'm going to pass this on to someone else. But I try to be as like just honest and because I feel like that was the stuff that helped me out the most when I first started trying to like do scripts seriously and actually try to get them published. Was I think I got, one of the things that I got really lucky on is having a few people who were editors take a few minutes out of their day to kind of like tear me apart a little bit and show me the stuff that I was doing wrong that just was never going to fly.
Yeah.
That was huge to me, and I think a lot of guys never, for whatever reason, they don't get that opportunity early enough.
Yeah, the first time I went to Chicago Comic-Con, Mark Silvestri was doing portfolio reviews for people. And one of the guys that was in line, he kind of ripped him apart, because the guy needed a lot of work on his anatomy. His backgrounds weren't tight, different stuff. And he was pretty brutal to the guy. And the guy, like, as he's walking away, was like, I knew this was a waste of my time. And, I was like, dude, he just gave you the best advice of your life.
Oh, exactly. He just told you. He just gave you a list of things. Like, he helped you so much more than somebody who's maybe a little better than you, but maybe he's not in the mood to really help him.
Right.
And he's just going to be like, oh, this looks nice, good job, send you on your way.
Exactly. And the guy's stuff, I saw it, I was like, oh, it looks decent. But, again, like, I knew, he needed some work. Like, his hands weren't real good, and, some of his, posing, wasn't great. So he just needed to work on that. So he needed to work with, like, live drawing, live models, basically. And the backgrounds, because if you can't draw backgrounds, you're not going to really do a lot as a comic artist. So,
well, yeah, and for a while now, one of the things that has sort of separated the wheat from the chaff in terms of artists are there's a lot of artists that can draw a decent pinup.
Yes.
But maybe don't do quite as well when it comes to storytelling.
Yeah.
Right, because that's the key. I mean, especially for me, like, I feel like by the time I'm done editing scripts, and I have a couple of guys who also, like, I have, beta readers, and both of them are like PhD English professors, and they're both complete dicks, and so they tear apart everything that I do. So by the time my script is like, I feel like it's done, it's pretty, like, it's as bare bones as I can make it, right? I try not to have a bunch of wasted exposition, so I'm really leaning on the artist to, to tell story and do that, make that happen, and it's a very, very tough job.
Yeah, was it a few weeks ago? Evan Dorkin went on a tirade on Twitter about this. Actually, not a tirade, but he was basically just ranting about how there was somebody that approached him or something at a con or something, and they basically the same thing. And he kept telling him, he's like, you have to learn storytelling. It's the most important part of the job.
Well, if you can't tell a story.
Yeah. I remember years ago in Wizard, they used to have this basic training thing.
In the magazine?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Oh, man. And
that's like 10 or 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah, dude, I still have...
We're all old.
Yeah, any issue of Wizard that I had, I still have the basic training from.
Wow.
I tore them all, my girlfriend or ex-girlfriend tore them all out, and I have them in like a binder.
And that's why she's an ex-girlfriend.
Right. No. Greg Capullo in one of them, I believe, talked about basically, like, he did a real quick thing. The story was that basically someone stole something from a cookie jar, kind of a thing. And he did the whole thing without words. Yep. And he was like, if I can't look at this and you can't tell what I'm trying to tell you, then I failed. I haven't done my job. So he's like, and he did like two versions of it, I think, and one is clearly better than the other, and I was like, I had never ever thought about approaching drawing in that, concept before.
Yeah.
So, it was then when I was like, there's actually, it's not just sit down and draw. There's a lot of cerebral work you need to do when you're doing that job.
Right. And that is exactly why there's pros go through so many steps, when they're like doing thumbnails.
Yeah.
And, I can tell you that something we do with the MCC stuff now, and this is from doing a couple of books and kind of like learning by error, was that we used to just kind of be like, oh, so everybody's going to do their own thing. Awesome. Yeah, just turn stuff in by this day and, we'll put everything together. Doesn't work, man. It does not work. People turn in crazy stuff, especially like people who are newer to it and they don't. I mean, there's a reason that comic artboard is 11 by 17.
Yeah.
You know, and it's because it has bleed lines and it has a safe zone and it has everything marked out on it, and it, you know, it's scalable down to the dimensions of a comic, which I can't remember exactly what they are, but they're super weird. Right?
Yeah.
Comic books they're not like anything else. They're only comic books are this size.
Yeah, true. Yep.
Right.
And so it turned into this total nightmare. So we built a template. If you were going to do digital art, you have to use this template.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to do real art, you have to use 11 by 17 artboard. And we the group buys the artboard and we'll give it to you, you know, just like Marvel does or whatever.
Right.
You know, we're not like asking artists to donate money and everything else, though a lot of them use their own anyway. But we kind of had to come up with some ground rules to be like, this is how you, and honestly, I feel like if you were to ask any of the artists that have worked with us, they will tell you that, like, yeah, that really helped. That has really helped me in terms of putting a portfolio together. It's helped me in terms of when I'm talking to people in the profession to try to get page rate type books.
Yeah.
Because now they know a little bit more. Like, this is what we need. We need it to be like this, and this is the day that your thumbnails are due, right? So when we have, because now it started off, it was just like me and Steve were kind of doing everything, and now we have like 3 editors doing different projects and whatnot. So, you know, we have dates that thumbnails are due and dates that, you know, okay, so your rough pencils are due, and, you know, just to see, so we can control process a little bit better and kind of be like keeping up with quality control as we go.
Well, yeah, sure, that makes sense, because
nice.
if you're like, hey, everybody, you know, 2 weeks from today, all the work is due, you know, and it's
Good
like,
luck,
well, no,
Yeah.
it's like, you know, maybe this isn't as finished as it needs to be, and this is, you know, like, maybe this needs another pass through an editor or something, and it's,
and all kinds of simple things.
Yeah.
All kinds of simple things, like, you know, a lot of guys, when they're first started too, you realize they didn't really read the script closely enough. And so they missed little nuances of things that they had to draw that they kind of drew wrong. So there's always a bunch of little things.
Sure.
But, you know, the MCC is meant to be kind of a learning thing. So I like to think that even when stuff is a little messed up, that's actually all more to the good, because it's just an opportunity for that guy to be like, oh, okay, cool. And then next time, and that time that he's getting paid $50 a page, he's not doing it twice.
Right. Well, yeah, because, I mean, when you're working on a page rate, you know, the less pages you do, the less money you make. So you don't want to have to do a bunch of redraws and, you know.
No.
And, I mean, I've seen books where they've had to, you know, delay because there needs to be a redraw. And it's frustrating as hell for, you know, a reader, you know.
Well, the reality is that if you're Jim Lee, they'll wait 6 months.
Oh, for sure.
For you to finish whatever it is you're doing. If you're, you know, a brand new guy on his first thing,
yeah,
first time that you miss your deadline and they can't release their book on time, and maybe that book gets cut from Diamond, or they get a couple of points go the wrong way because they're paying a penalty now to release it late.
Yeah,
you're probably gone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And it makes sense. I mean, it's why, you know, like I heard years ago about how Marvel has for artists, they have, you know, the Marvel way, which is, you know, an easier way to break down a page and such, so that, you know, basically it's a template so that they can keep work churning out at a reasonable, you know, a reasonable rate.
It's I've seen some guys who wrote Marvel style scripts.
Yeah.
Maybe one day I'll get a chance to do a script in that style, but I have not. I've not even tried to write anything like that, because basically you don't write any dialogue.
Yeah, exactly.
You just are like sort of describe what it is, and then when you get the pictures, then you build the dialogue around what you see, which
is a weird...
I understand it, but it just feels so backwards.
Yeah,
see, that's what I was about to say. It's backwards feeling.
Yep. But I know they've used it for years at different times, and there's some artists that they'll kind of, like, if someone's running behind and they have to bring in a fill-in kind of a thing or whatever, they'll be like, here, use this kind of a thing, because this way we know it's going to get done, you know, and then that way, because, you know, like you said, it's a big hurt for, you know, because that was one of the things, like, when Image first came onto the scene, like, half their books were late. and everybody was like, you know.
Well, yeah, well, it was a bunch of. I have a lot of
Delinquents.
respect for all those guys, but it's a bunch of like prima donna,
Oh, for
like,
sure.
rock star guys.
Oh, for sure.
We're like, look how rich we are. We're amazing, and then people are like, actually, Youngblood's not that good, and number 2 isn't even here.
Right, and don't get me started on the fact that Ry Bliefeld's attached. But anyway, I could go on for hours.
Oh,
But yeah, you know, like Marvel and DC, they've made, you know, they're not late on a lot of books. Lately they have been. I've noticed over the last few months they've been missing books a little more than they used to. But, you know, they've never been known for putting out books late. They just, like you said earlier, they just don't tolerate it, you know.
well, and they, I mean, there's a lot of data that would support that when books get late, they start losing a lot of money. I think a really good example from relatively recently is Superman Unchained.
Yeah.
Which was a book that was released to a lot of fanfare and sold quite a bit, and then ended up being, and I don't remember exactly how long, but wasn't it years by the time it finally wrapped up? Like 2 years or something?
I think it was something like that. Yeah. I remember it was the delays were ridiculous on it.
Yeah, like 3 months and 4 months and 5 months on every single issue, and by the time it was done, it wasn't even like cracking the top 100.
Right,
you know?
And I'm always like, you know, when there's there's just some artists. Like I remember for a while there, what's his name? Travis, was it Charest or Charest or Charest? I don't know how you say his name. He did Wildcats for a while, and he does like a painted style, and it's gorgeous, but it takes him forever to do it. And he kept getting books, and I'm like, you know, you need to get these books in the can. Like you got to get like 6 issues or something.
Yep.
That way he's got a nice buffer, so he can put out his quality of work without hurting the bottom line. Basically, it's like you know, I've seen Adam Hughes do that so that he can spend the amount of time he wants on a book, and then you know, like there was a Wonder Woman series or something he worked on, and they didn't even solicit issue 1 till he had like all 6 or something done. And that was so that there'd be no late, you know, anything with it.
Yep. What we've been doing with SourcePoint is because we're operating SourcePoint a little bit differently than most of like the small presses right now. Most small presses right now, actually most presses, period, outside of like Marvel, DC, the Marvel, DC, like house publishers like Vertigo and Epic, and then maybe Dark Horse and some IDW, is basically that everybody uses the image model, right?
Yeah.
Like, bring us completely finished stuff, and we'll slap our logo on it, and then we'll distribute it, and then we'll split it with you.
Yeah.
And that's all well and good. I think a lot of people, like, you know, they think that they can do their 8 pages, and they'll pay out of pocket to do 8 pages, and then they're going to take the image, and Eric Stevenson's going to be blown away, and then he's going to write them a giant check to finish their book.
Hey, right.
No, not going to happen.
Nope.
Like, he's going to say, chances are he's never even going to see it, but let's pretend that it's really, really good, and it's just great, and, like, let's pretend that you used to write Wonder Woman or something, so you have 10,000 fans.
Awesome.
He's going to say...
I'm putting that on my resume now. I used to watch...
He's going to say, yeah, come back when all 10 issues are done, and then we'll start releasing it. So what we've done with SourcePoint is we try to pay up front. At least a certain amount, so that we are taking some of the financial risk with the artists and writers that we're working with.
Okay.
But we do, like right now we have a book being worked on, and it's going to be 5 issues, and I think they're just starting to get into it a little bit. But we're going to hold it until the entire thing is done.
Yeah.
Because we're still relatively new. We've only distributed a few books, and I want, when we get, you know, something that's going to come out, I want it to be bang, 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 bang. You know, nothing can go wrong, right?
Right.
And so I think that basically I'm just saying that, yes, what you said earlier is right. You want to try to be as ahead as you can.
Yeah, and like I said, I know, you know, especially at the you know, Marvel and DC, like they just don't want artists to be behind, but it's like, man, I remember, you know, like you can just name time after time, and a lot of times they're really popular artists, you know, or sometimes it's the writers, because, you know, sometimes I've seen writers on Twitter or artists to where they're like, yeah, I'm waiting on the script, because people will start attacking them basically, thinking they take the time, and it's like, yeah, it's not me this time.
Strangely.
I can't remember who it was. There was I want to say it was like Mark Millar and somebody else on one of their books, and the artist was, whoever the artist was, he was like, yeah, it's not me. I'm waiting for him to finish the script. Like, as soon as he does, I'll get to work, but I can't.
Millar, as soon as Millar climbs out of his money pool.
Right. And I was like,
it's dried off
yeah.
with his towel made of $100 bills.
Probably, man.
And writes the script, he will.
I don't know that there's a guy right now that seems to sell more stuff before the stuff is out than he does. You know, it's like everything he seems to write is optioned for a movie before the first issue hits.
Well, it's just, yeah, he's a baller right now.
Yeah, I mean, I get, you know.
And until he falls on his face and has a massive flop, he will continue to be a baller.
Yeah.
I mean, he could probably call Frank Miller and ask him how that feels.
Yeah. There's that.
But yeah, generally speaking, I like Mark Millar quite a lot. He 100% he is a mercenary though.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, he was like, "Oh, you want to make a movie about Wanted? Oh, it's not really going to be Wanted at all.
Yeah,
I'm still getting a big check though. I don't give a shit.
Awesome.
I don't give a shit at all. Do whatever you want."
Right. So I guess, you know, we never asked you this. Like, who's your, like, did you have, like, who was your, like, comic inspiration growing up or coming up or now or however, whenever you want to answer that?
Well, you know, I probably similar age to you guys, and so we at least that feels that way anyway. So, you know, a lot of the comics I was reading growing up were from the late 80s and, you know, through the 90s. Stuff that now is a lot of it's sort of poo-pooed on as being bad. Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, there's some stuff that I just like still because I just liked it when I was 13, you know. But in a lot of ways, I think I kind of agree with that assessment.
Yeah.
But I think that by the time I had gotten a little bit older, like into high school, 96, 97, 98, I had started to get into, I think, Hellboy and Sandman, and a little stuff like that. I think Preacher was a big one for me. That was started to come out when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Those things were all like very, very formative for me, and you know, they made comic books like, and they had been art long before then, right? But I totally missed the boat on Watchmen. I read Watchmen as an adult.
Well, I read it as a teenager, but it was because I was working at a comic shop, and you know, somebody was like, they're like, you haven't read Watchmen? This. Yeah, or Dark Knight Returns, you know. I was like, no.
Yeah, see, I read both of those. Those books were just a little bit too old for me in the 80s.
Yeah.
So I missed those things. So for me, my first kind of exposure to like comics, adult comics, was Hellboy and Sandman, and
that's,
you know, some things like Preacher, definitely.
Yeah, I remember reading Sandman and Preacher and just going, this just changes everything. Like, this isn't superhero stuff. This is, you know, like, this is stuff that, like, as soon as I read it, I was like, yes, this is what, you know, I like this, and I want more of this, you know?
Yeah, I was like, these are like the novels I'm reading with pictures.
Right, which makes them easier to digest. No.
What was the first comic you remember reading as a kid?
The very first comic I remember reading as a kid? Wow.
Yeah. What was your first high, man? What got you into it?
I think that some of the earliest things I can remember picking up and reading were, I'm not 100% sure who did them, but I want to say it was there's a Silver Surfer run from the 80s, I believe, and that's one of the first comics I remember picking up. And I want to say it went something like 50 or 75 issues. But I was born in '79, so when Watchmen came out, I was 7.
Yeah.
So mostly, pretty standard superhero fare. To this day, my favorite Marvel stuff is the sci-fi stuff, the space stuff, Silver Surfer, and all that. That stuff is Galactus is my favorite big two character.
Nice.
I have a 2 foot tall Galactus around here somewhere.
Yeah.
The build a figure.
No.
This is from like the 90s.
Yeah.
What?
It's a Toy Biz one from the 90s. I'm pretty sure.
Oh my god!
If it's the one
I have the Build-A-Figure one, but I don't have. I do. You know what I have though? I have a Fantastic Four number 48.
That's the first appearance of Galactus, isn't it?
And the Silver Surfer. Yeah.
Silver Surfer. Okay.
Yeah, nice.
Yes, it makes sense, right?
That's better than my 2 foot tall Galactus.
I don't know.
I have
I'm
tea
not,
parties with.
I'm not sure it is.
2 foot tall. That is awesome though. I wish I did have one. So I think that some of the earliest stuff I remember is some 80s. Like for instance, I remember there's like a Rocket Raccoon that Mike Mignola did in the 80s. And I remember reading it as a kid and then being like shocked to my core reading Hellboy when I was like 18. That same guy who did Rocket Raccoon in the 80s. And then I remember some other like big books that were formative for me. Is I remember it was a big deal to get my mom like this is back when grocery stores sold comics, right? You had a spinner rack.
Oh god,
Yeah, I remember those. Yep.
Up those books.
We didn't have a comic store in my hometown. We had to go to Lansing to go to a comic book store. But we'd go to every week. We'd go there, and every week I would go because I don't remember it occurring to me that comics were monthly at the time. Time was a very slippery concept. But when Infinity Gauntlet was coming out,
right,
that was a big deal because I remember very clearly that my mom would buy me 2 comics, and I was super lucky to get 2. My friends usually didn't get any or 1. But like my judgment would be how many characters are on the cover.
Oh yeah, yeah,
nice.
I've heard quite a few people that's how they judged books when they were kids. That's interesting.
Is there a bunch of characters on the cover? Because that must mean that I'm going to get my $1.25 worth.
Right.
There's a bunch of awesome shit in here. So yeah, Infinity Gauntlet was a huge for me. And then of course Image happened, and all of a sudden it was like the first time you could get number 1s of all this stuff.
Yep.
And it was sort of like all this new stuff. So of course I had all the Image stuff.
Right, and Valiant launched not too long after that.
Valiant became big.
Yeah.
And I kind of went through all of that stuff, and then I kind of got out of all that as I got a little bit older, and those comics I really liking were, like I mentioned, Hellboy and Sandman, and Hellblazer was a big one for me, and Preacher.
Yeah, I got into Hellblazer later because it was one that I kept had recommended to me by the comic shop I was going to at the time. And I was like, I don't know, it just doesn't, I don't know, and I finally, years later, I finally grabbed some of the trades and started reading like that and Swamp Thing, and I was like, I missed out on these. Like,
damn it.
Oh, like the Alan Moore Swamp Thing and stuff. Oh, it's so good.
It's, it's easy to forget, actually, how good Alan Moore was.
Yeah, because he's not been so great lately.
He's too busy doing wizardry.
Yeah, he's like a level 9 wizard now.
Yeah, it's true. He's like comic books. Bah.
I'm dungeon crawling.
Right.
Oh, man. Right. He's a weird dude.
Yeah.
He's a weird dude, but I would imagine that if you were him and had lived his life, you might be a weird dude too.
Right?
Yeah, fair enough.
Listen, he can be a weird dude because the stuff he gave us years ago was plenty. That's enough.
I mean, he has a lot of built up karma with Watchmen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it sort of like made the entire world go like, oh, this stuff is actually literature.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
If Watchmen never happened, then you could argue that all of the titles that I just talked about would have never occurred.
Yeah, you're probably right, because I think that's why I didn't I think like my brother and stuff. My brother bought comics, and that's where I got my first taste of them, and he skipped right past Watchmen. And I think it was because it didn't look like even though it is a superhero story, it's not a superhero story.
Right.
You know, and I think he probably was like, you know, and just skipped right past it. So, you know, but later, like I said, once, you know, people found out I hadn't read it and they're like cramming the trade down my face, you know, and I read it, and I think Tony and I read it around the same time because it was we worked at the same comic shop, so. And we were just like, "What? How have we not read this sooner?"
I'm looking at my trade over there on my bookshelf right now as we're talking about this.
Or when someone forced me to read the Frank Miller Daredevil. Forced. Yeah, well, it was kind of forced. I had no interest in Daredevil, but now I'm like, it's.
Yeah.
I'm still not a huge Daredevil fan, but that is something I'll recommend to people all day.
The Miller Daredevil?
Yeah.
It's extremely good.
So good, yeah.
I have a bunch of that run actually still in floppies.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Nice.
I don't know.
I'd never had that. I have hardcovers. That's one of the few series I have in hardcover.
I used to have a pretty ridiculous collection of comic books.
Yeah.
And I gave most of them away. Now I have like 3 short boxes.
Oh yeah.
But like every book in it is something, you know.
Oh sure.
Right.
Like everything that I have is now like something cool.
It's your comics collection distilled down into awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's all like my Daredevil stuff is all like first appearance of Elektra, death of Elektra, first appearance of Bullseye, you know, all that stuff. It's because I kind of just gave everything else away. Like if I didn't look at it and was immediately like,
right,
might be an investment, because it just got to be, especially when we started having kids, it just got to be where this takes up so much room. Yep. And
that's why I read digital stuff now, because it's, you know, like I have no want to collect comics anymore.
Man, I do enjoy. I think Comixology does a really nice job. I think Drive-Thru does a really nice job. Not as nice as Comixology, obviously, because you're never going to beat that, what they're doing with their guided view with the PDF download. But
true.
But for the stuff that I really, really like, I pretty much have to have a trade of it.
Yeah, I understand.
I have a lot of stuff that I own on both my iPad and I have the trade on my bookshelf.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. You know, sitting down with your iPad to read your weekly books, it just doesn't have the magic of, you know, sitting down with, whether it's a trade or just the floppy of it. It's just, there was just something about having that stack of books, you know.
Even that slight smell to ink, you know, and although I smell that all the time now, but
right.
Yeah.
Just because Tony has a problem with it. But
yes. I chop books and do lines.
He just snorts all day. It's a real mess.
Well, you know, that's all right. Don't let that bother you.
But yeah, I still have a good amount of trades. That's about all I have left. And even those I've kind of looked at a few times and been like, I should probably cleave these. You know, like there's a lot of them now that I'm like, I'd probably never read that again, you know?
So I'm the same. I got a lot of trades that I'll never read again, but a lot of them I pass on to my son,
which is awesome
to read, and then other ones I'm like, I'm just going to hang on to these because they mean something to me.
Yeah. Well, and you can always chop them up and snort them.
Well, that too. I mean, eventually I'll run out of pages.
Depends on what you get, I guess. You know,
true.
Go buy more Alan Moore stuff. There's a lot of words in there, or stuff written by Kevin Smith. There's a lot of words in that.
Yeah, I can go back and forth on his comic stuff.
Mm-hmm. Same here.
Sometimes I think he's pretty good, and other times not. Like, surprisingly, I really liked Quiver when he did the Green Arrow run, kind of way back in the day.
Yep, I remember that. Yep, that was good.
And that actually is kind of something that I like. For me, normally you would expect me not to like it because it's so steeped in like continuity and lore.
Yeah, that's true. It is. Yeah.
Because usually I don't like that type of stuff.
Yeah, I had to do a little research for that because I've never been much of a Green Arrow guy. So
well, it's not even so much that. It's like I'm not a big one for continuity just in general. Right.
Okay.
Like I'm more like I don't care so much if it agrees with the previous stuff. I'm just more like, is the story that you're telling me good? I'm more about, does it serve the story that I'm in? And if it doesn't, then I'm not really that interested.
That's fair.
I mean, we're all already like putting in quite a bit of suspension of disbelief to begin with.
This is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because like the only times that the continuity thing really bothers me anymore is, like you had issues of Wolverine where Wolverine was dead, but then there were issues of X-Men where he wasn't, and it's all supposed to be
about X-Men and Wolverine bothers me.
Fair enough.
Just the fact that that's all just bothersome.
Yeah, or like right now you've got a Justice League book where Batman is Bruce Wayne, but in the Batman book he's not Bruce Wayne, and they're kind of supposed to be happening somehow either at the same time or we're just not being told when Justice League is happening. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that kind of stuff when it's, especially if you're reading it monthly.
Yes.
Yeah, but if I hardly ever have time
to
read monthly books anymore, so I'm always reading things in trade versions.
Yeah.
So I'm really just more interested in is the story that you're trying to tell me?
Are you not entertained?
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot less interest in that sort of thing. So something like Quiver, which at the time was very steeped in. I mean, you had to know what happened in Death of Superman and how that led to Hal Jordan becoming Parallax because Coast City got destroyed by Cyborg Superman.
Spoilers! Come on, man.
This is 20 years ago.
So
you had to know all this stuff and why is Hal Jordan the Spectre now and all of this weird stuff and him and Ollie are buddies, and it's just completely chock full of this. But I actually enjoyed the story despite all those things, which normally would make me complain and be like, nah.
Yeah. I think when I read that, I saw it as essentially kind of like Kevin Smith's love letter to DC Comics.
That absolutely is.
And I thought that's why I was able to not, because I'm with you a lot of times. When you've got to know all that. Luckily, I mean, I did know all of it, so I'm sure that helped too. But
I did too, and now I'm kind of ashamed. Actually,
you just admitted it. Too.
Yeah, listen.
Exactly.
The real test is can you read Crisis and follow it? Because if so, then it's I don't know. Then you got a problem.
The answer to that question is no. I cannot.
Good.
Especially not the Man, what was the one that Grant Morrison did? Not even that long ago. Was it Final Crisis? I didn't even get through it.
I think so. Yeah.
Grant Morrison is another one that sometimes I'm blown away by how genius he is, and other times I'm like, man, what in the hell are you even doing? This whole story makes sense.
I agree. Yep, I'm the same way. Every time I go to sit down with a book of his, I'm always like, well, let's see what side of the coin this one is, because.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I recently read, and this is an older book, but I read Joe the Barbarian. Have you read that?
The name sounds familiar. I don't think I read it, though.
It's a Grant Morrison limited series he did. It was 6 issues, and it is genius. It's genius. It's the 6 issues of this such well put together. It's the whole story is a guy who's having an insulin. He's a diabetic, and he's having going into diabetic shock. And he's trying to crawl from his bedroom to his kitchen, but his mind is hallucinating this entire fantasy world of the challenge of getting down the steps, and it is.
See, that's generally where Morrison's at his best.
Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting,
right? Because he's the one that wrote Annihilator, wasn't he, Tony?
What's that?
Was he the one that wrote Annihilator?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there was a recent book he did called Annihilator, where it's a guy who's writing, but basically the guy's dying. And this stuff kind of manifests in his life, the characters from this screenplay or something he's writing. Yeah, and the art is freaking crazy amazing by Fraser Irving. But I reading it. I was like, this is the kind of Morrison stuff I love. I love when he does this kind of I don't know how to word it, but it's within itself basically, not an Inception thing, but something along that Meta, that's the word for it.
He does a lot of meta stuff,
yeah.
Yes. And sometimes it gets completely out of control.
Yeah. Annihilator kind of got out of control toward the end.
Yeah. It was still an entertaining read.
Yeah. So, all right, well, we should probably kind of wrap this up here because we usually shoot for about an hour and we're a little over that. So, do you want to plug all your wares, sir?
Sure. Right now, the biggest thing I've got going is Bayani and the $9 of the Moon. There's a Kickstarter going right now. You just go to Kickstarter and search Bayani, Bayani. It should pop right up. It's a kid-friendly book that follows Bayani and his best friend Tala as they sort of battle their way through the myths and legends of Filipino folklore to rescue these goddesses and bring peace back to the land. It's being published by Caliber Comics, which is sort of a legendary name in the world of indie comics. They are one of the longest lasting and you could argue between them and Dark Horse and Oni, who kind of started first in the late 80s, but they're up there. Probably best known for Dead World, I think. I'm really happy to be part of it, and just need help to get the Kickstarter a little bit more off the ground. And it's covering the first 3 issues are coming out, and so basically it's covering the first trade edition of the book. If you're interested in anything else that I do, SourcePoint Press publishes a horror comic that I do called Up the River. It's available all over the place. A lot of stores have it. Definitely SourcePointPress.com. And Comixology and Drive-Thru and all that good stuff. Also, if you're interested in the Michigan Comics Collective, which we talked about, I think, quite a bit, you can check out a lot more at MichiganComicsCollective.org. And you can find me on Twitter at TMcIntire1, and that's TMCINTIRE and the number 1.
All right, excellent. And we'll have all the links and the link to your Kickstarter and such in the show notes, as well as... Go ahead, Tony.
So just one thing I got to say about Kickstarter, your rewards, you got great rewards on here. A lot of original art. You got some really great rewards.
Yeah, man, I did a lot of begging and feeding.
Fair enough.
With people to get that, but it does range from some guys who are new to the business to guys who are kind of bigger name. Well, I think the Chris Weston one is gone, but we were just talking about Grant Perkins. Chris Weston, he was the artist on Filth Grant Morrison, rather.
Right.
Nice.
So basically, like every friend I have in the business agreed to do a piece of art, which is super awesome of them. And
right,
and there's a few more that I've been holding in the wings to throw out. As we get like halfway through and 3/4 of the way through, and I start panicking more. Like,
yeah.
Dear God, please give me some more money. I need to make this happen.
Right.
But yeah, thank you. I tried to do. I try to do a good job on the whole thing. I've run one other Kickstarter about a year ago, and it went pretty well. But I feel like I learned a lot about what people want and what people don't care about.
Yeah.
But we'll find out. Maybe I'm completely full of it too. Who knows?
Well, it can be both. I mean, really,
It's true.
Yeah. So
it's true, and it probably is.
Right.
Were you also aware, just because, from listening to Snake Oil Comics, I'm scrolling through all the examples of the different artists' artwork. Were you aware you have a Deadpool on your Kickstarter here?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Is there? Actually, I think that's the Joe Frere one, right?
That is, yep.
Yeah. That was probably, yeah. Oh, well, I don't know what can you do? People like Deadpool.
I just know you don't.
Man, Deadpool. I don't know if you listen to Snake Oil, or how often you listen to it, but just recently somebody was on and they were crying about the Deadpool trailer, about how that doesn't really capture what Deadpool's all about. They're going to ruin Deadpool. And I'm just like, oh my God. That movie is pretty much exactly what Deadpool is about.
Yeah, that's what I thought when I watched it.
Exactly. Like, if you like Deadpool, you're going to like that movie.
Yep.
Stupid-ass jokes, gratuitous violence. That's it. That's all it is. Like, no, it isn't.
Sounds like
it isn't anything more than that.
Yeah.
They haven't touched on Deadpool's sensitive side.
Yeah. Good God. All that being said, I really did enjoy, Rick Remender's run on Uncanny X-Force. And that has a whole bunch of Deadpool in it.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, sure, because Marvel's, understands the money-making machine that Deadpool is currently. So
yeah,
right.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess, sometimes you have to lay down with the man and hope that...
Take that old burrito.
Yeah, you got to take the old burrito and be like, hey, I know you kids want this Deadpool picture.
Maybe toss me a sandwich.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thanks a lot for joining us. It was a good time. We'll have to have you
much
back.
For having me. I had a really good time.
Yeah,
we covered a lot of ground, man.
That's what we do here. We're serious.
That was
a really conversation about from the business of comics through. I mean, it was all over the place.
Listen, you can ask the ladies. We're thorough.
we leave no crevice unexplored.
None. There's no shame here.
You're going to find a cracker in there.
Been jogging? No problem.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Man. All right, man. Well, thanks again, and we'll have to have you back because I enjoyed the talk. We got to talk some more, and
yeah, absolutely.
And whatnot. So,
rumor has it we're going to be on Snake Oil Comics.
Oh yeah, I heard about this actually. It's the night before I go to Taylor, I think. Friday the 15th or 14th, maybe of August.
Yeah, 14th sounds right.
Yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be fun.
Yep.
So we'll have to come up with like some kind of fun game to play.
Excellent.
All right. Well, I really appreciate it, guys. The help, any help getting the word out, and I enjoyed talking to you guys. So definitely do it again for sure.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Sounds good. See you, Travis.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
That was Travis McIntire.
Yep.
Lovely, lovely man from Michigan.
Wasn't he in New Kids on the Block?
He was the dreamy one.
I'm not sure about that.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Again, we'll have all of his links on in the show notes and such. And Tony's already thrown on the website the link to his Kickstarter.
Yeah, and I'll keep it up there until his campaigns.
So after you're done throwing most of your money at us, go throw him some money too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. I don't know. We don't do anything different to wrap up the
No, I think we just pretty much at this point we just say take it away, Annalise.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Enthusiast this.